Good afternoon everyone. This is Ayana, faculty member of Department of Food and Nutrition, Barakpur Ashtaguru Srinivas College. Today I am here to present a topic which is entitled as Hormonal Regulation of Calcium Homeostasis. This topic can cover both the physiology and the nutritional portion of our total curriculum. Here, before entering into the entire detailing of this regulation, I would like to discuss some key points those are necessary to understand this entire regulation of our body. First thing that appears mind after seeing this heading, that is the hormone. Now what is hormone? As we all know that hormones are those organic substances, they are generally secreted by any kind of specific cells from any specific glands to a specific signals from any kind of blood parameter change so that they can perform their metabolic and biological activities to conduct that particular physiological process, and generally they require in a very small quantity. Now hormones, how they works? Generally, as I stated before, that any kind of change in our blood parameter will lead to give a positive signaling to a specific endocrine gland. Now the specific endocrine gland will secrete a specific hormone to conduct that specific activity, or we can say that biological process. So any kind of change in our blood parameter will always give a positive signaling to the specific endocrine gland so that hormone can release from the specific gland or the specific cells of that endocrine gland into our bloodstream and can reach to the specific target area where they can perform their specific biological activity so that they can regulate the first thing, that is the change in the specific parameter that present in our blood. So specifically we can say that hormone is a such kind of substance that are generally secreted when they are required in a situation to change or to control any kind of biological activities or processes. So this is the general mode of action of any kind of hormones. Now we are moving to the first slide. Here again I would like to discuss some key points related to this topic. Now what is homeostasis? As you can see that homeostasis is a state of internal equilibrium maintained by various type of cells or organism by adjusting its physiological processes. We can say that homeostasis is mainly a tendency to control the overall biological processes in a harmony so that the body can perform its various biological and physiological functionings in a smooth manner. So to maintain this homeostasis of our body, we need certain chemicals. Those chemicals are known as hormones. Here we are talking about the entire homeostasis of calcium that mainly occur in our body. So before entering into the detailing of the pathway, how it works, we should know some key points about this specific mineral which is known as calcium. Now what it is? It is the most abundant mineral present in our body. As here we can see that the total content of calcium of an adult person is about 1 to 1.5 kg, and of it 99% of calcium is mainly present in our bones and teeth, and only 1% is mainly found outside our skeletal tissues, and they perform variety of functions in our body. So from this introductory slide we can say that calcium is a very important mineral of our body, as it performs a variety of functions. So it is really important to maintain the normal blood calcium level in our body, and this maintenance of normal blood calcium level is generally done by 3 different hormones in our body, namely vitamin D, or the active form of vitamin D, which is known as calcitriol or 1,25 dehydroxycholecalciferol. Another one is parathyroid hormone, and the last one is calcitriol. I will discuss later how these hormones act individually or together to and interact in between themselves so that they can maintain the normal blood calcium level in our body. So as I have stated in my earlier slide that calcium plays a variety of functions in our body, so here are some. Like they are the most important mineral for the development of bones and teeth of human being or any living organisms. Generally, calcium and phosphate, these 2 minerals together form hydroxyapatite, which is a complex compound, and this compound is generally necessary for the formation of bone matrix, so that our bone and teeth can develop, or the formation of bone and teeth can happen in individual's life because of the presence of calcium and phosphorus in our diet. Apart from the most important functions development of bones and teeth, here the other functions of calcium are also there, like they are very much involved in the contraction process of our muscles. As here you can see that they are very much important for the contraction of skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and as well as smooth muscles. Generally, calcium interacts with troponin C so that the contraction process can start. There is another way is also there, like they also interact, they also stimulate the ATPase enzyme so that they can interact between myosin and actin molecule, and this is the one of the most important part of the muscle contraction. So if there is not enough calcium present in the body, then there must be some problem may occur with the muscle contraction process. Apart from the development of bones and teeth and the contraction of skeletal muscles, cardiac muscle or smooth muscle, another one of the most important functions of calcium is the blood clotting. As you all know that blood clotting has a cascadic reactions, and many of these cascadic reactions are also dependent on the presence of calcium, which mainly functions there as a cofactor. Lack of calcium may cause the lack of blood clotting. So, for a proper blood clotting process, it is really very important it is very important to present proper calcium, as it's also important for the conversion of some inactive blood clotting factors to its active form. Now, the transmission of nerve impulses, it is the another functions of calcium. And lastly, here we can see that the function of a second messenger. Now, what is a second messenger? Again, second messenger is a certain type of chemical. Those are mainly necessary for amplifying the signaling process that are necessary for the release of any hormones to control any kind of change in the blood parameter. What is second messenger? What is the function of second messenger? Here, any kind of change in the blood parameter can give any positive signaling to specific endocrine gland. Now, release of second messenger can trigger this signaling process. So that the release of second messenger can also enhance the secretion of specific hormone from the specific gland, so that the entire function can go smoothly or rapidly, so that the main change the hormone is that function will come back or control eventually with the help of second messenger, as it facilitate or amplify the signaling process. And the more signaling means more activation of the endocrine gland and the more release of that hormone, so that the specific function for that the hormone has been released, that function will be conducted properly. So this is the function of second messenger, and here we can see that calcium worked as a second messenger for the various hormones and mostly for the peptide hormones, and sometimes calcium calmodulin system together can work as a second messenger system and for the hormones like epinephrine. Okay, now I will proceed to the next slide. Here are some basic facts that are required to know about calcium. Like for any kind of adult person, approximately any kind of adult person, they need 100 mg of calcium per day. And to meet this calcium need, it is necessary to include various kinds of milk and milk products in our diet, as they are the best sources of calcium present in our food variety. Apart from the best sources, leafy vegetables, beans and fish, cabbage, egg yolk, those are also considered as the good sources of calcium. So, along with milk and milk products, this kind of foods we should also include in our diet to maintain or to fulfill the entire calcium need of individuals' daily need of calcium. Now, we should know that whatever amount of calcium we have consumed through our diet, it's not entirely absorbed in our body. Mostly the absorption of calcium occurs in the duodenum part of our small intestine and by an energy-dependent active process. And this absorption of calcium is very much mediated or very much controlled by various hormones, and these hormones we are going to discuss in the later slides. Like I have already stated that the hormones like calcitriol and the hormones like parathyroid hormone and the calcitonin, these three hormones play a very significant role to maintain the normal calcium level in our body. So these are some common facts. Now, factors that promote calcium absorption. So, if we are concerned about the calcium absorption of our diet, then these factors we should remember, we should consider these 5 factors to increase the calcium absorption in our body. First of all, vitamin D. Now this vitamin D has several impacts on the calcium absorption in our body. It's really very important for the proper maintenance of calcium level of an individual's life. Vitamin D, which is a vitamin, mostly it is known as a fat-soluble vitamin. But depending upon its activity or depending upon its mode of action, sometimes we also consider this vitamin as a hormone. Why? Because vitamin D has some specific properties, those are very much similar to our hormones. Because of these reasons, sometimes vitamin D is also considered as a hormone. Vitamin D is directly synthesized in our body in presence of sunlight, just like a hormone. Most of the vitamin D we are talking about, most of the required vitamin D, as I have said in the earlier slide, that near about 1000 mg of vitamin, as I have said earlier, then most of the calcium that we require are that is not possible to absorb without the presence of vitamin D. And the vitamin D is mainly produced in our body in presence of sunlight, and very few amount of vitamin D we can get from the dietary sources. So the first thing that we can say that vitamin D can synthesize in our body like any other endocrine or any other hormones. Secondly, like other hormones, vitamin D has some specific target areas where it can act. And in case of vitamin D, these target areas are bones, kidneys and small intestine. And apart from these two, vitamin D, which is synthesized in our skin in presence of sunlight, is an inactive form, and it is activated in the kidney it is activated in the kidney, and then it can absorb calcium, dietary calcium, so that to maintain the normal calcium level in our blood. Lastly, just like hormones or just like steroid hormones, vitamin D generally moves into any particular target cells, and there it generally combines with a specific membrane receptor and form a receptor vitamin D complex or calcitonin receptor complex. Then this complex approaches to various DNAs, and there from the approaching DNA it generally produces some proteins called calmodulins in case of calcium absorption, and then calmodulin increases the vitamin D, calmodulin increases the calcium absorption. So, like other steroid hormones, vitamin D is also acts like other hormones, so it is sometimes also called as a hormone. Now, parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is also known as PTH. Now, this PTH and parathyroid hormones is generally secreted by the parathyroid gland. This parathyroid gland is generally located or situated behind the thyroid gland, and this parathyroid gland contains two types of cells. One is chief cells and another one is oxyntic cells. This parathyroid hormone is secreted from the chief cells. And this parathyroid hormone plays an important role in maintaining the calcium, normal level of calcium in our body. Next, acidity. Acidity or low pH, which is very much important for the proper absorption of calcium, or more precisely proper absorption of dietary calcium in our body. Lactose also promote the proper absorption of calcium, and the amino acid lysine and arginine are also involved in the promotion of calcium uptake in our body. Now, the factors that mainly inhibit the calcium absorption. Here we can say that factors like phytate and oxalates, those are known as anti-nutrients. Why anti-nutrients? As presence of these substances can form insoluble salt with calcium, so the calcium will not be available for the absorption process or to conduct its various important biological functionings. So in that case, presence of phytate and oxalate also will always hinder the calcium absorption. Now moving to the next one, that is the dietary phosphate. Dietary phosphate generally always hinders the absorption of calcium by producing calcium phosphate insoluble complex. Calcium phosphate insoluble complex, the formation of calcium phosphate insoluble complex will always hinder the absorption of calcium in our daily diet. Now, the free fatty acids and alkaline condition, these two conditions also hinders the calcium absorption. Okay, so after the promoting factor and the inhibiting factor of calcium absorptions, here are some facts those we should know about the calcium when it is present in our plasma and in our interstitial fluid. Normal range of blood calcium level in our body is 9 to 11 mg per dl. And to maintain this normal range, it is really very a difficult task for the three other hormones, as I have already stated. To maintain this normal range, there are certain steps or mechanisms are there to maintain the entire processing. So this 9 to 11 mg per dl is a normal range of calcium, and of this range, 50% of this range of calcium is mainly available in an iodized form, and which is functionally the most active one. And this 9 to 11 mg of DL calciums, the 10% serum calcium is found in association with citrate and phosphate, like calcium citrate and calcium phosphate, and about 40% of serum calcium is bound with proteins, mostly albumin and a larger extent with globulin. The ionized and the citrate bound calcium is diffusible from the blood to the tissues, while the protein bound calcium is non-diffusible. So these are the forms of calcium that we can get in the plasma. So from these three forms, we can say that ionized and citrate forms of calcium is diffusible, and whereas protein bound calcium is non-diffusible. Now the next one. What are the different factors that mainly regulate our blood calcium level? There are three factors or three hormones, we can say, mainly calcitriol, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. As I have stated earlier, that calcitriol is also known as active form of vitamin D or 1,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol. Now this 1,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol, it has immense valuable functions or activities to control the overall calcium level in our body. It has three different target areas in our body, namely bones, small intestine and kidney. In case of bones, calcitriol mainly involves in the both mineralization and demineralization process. Or we can say the bone remodeling process is very much initiated or very much controlled by this hormone known as calcitriol. This hormone generally in case of bones, it mainly promotes the formation of bones by activating the osteoblood cells, so that more and more free calcium and phosphate can deposit it and to form new bones. And in case of, and when there is any kind of conditions when blood calcium level is going down in a human body, then this vitamin D3 or this calcitriol, it helps in the liberation of free calcium from the bones by the demineralization process. So this calcitriol has immense impact on the maintenance of the blood calcium level in several ways, and we will discuss it in later slides. Now the second one, that is the parathyroid hormone, which is mainly secreted from the chief cells of parathyroid gland, which is a polypeptide, and this hormone generally it acts like by activating the cyclic AMP of the target cells, and when the cyclic AMP of the target cells generally it also initiates or activates the calcium ions present in that target cell, and then this target cell or these activated calcium ions, they initiate the phosphorylation reactions of the proteins by the different kinase reaction, and this is the way through which the parathyroid hormone generally works. And like the calcitriol, it also has three distinct target areas like bones, small intestine and kidney. And sometimes it is also important for the presence, the presence of parathyroid hormone, because this parathyroid hormone is important for the activation of the formation of the active form of vitamin D in the kidney. So parathyroid hormone is on one hand it is important for the maintenance of the proper calcium level in the body, and also it is important for the formation of active form of vitamin D in our kidney. And this active form of vitamin D in turn will important for the absorption of the calcium from our diet. So these two hormones are related. Now the third one, that is calcitonin. Calcitonin also a peptide hormone, and this hormone is released from the parafollicular cells of thyroid gland. And surprisingly, calcitonin has the different, or we can say that it has the exact opposite functioning of the parathyroid gland, and so the calcitonin also has the same target areas like bone, small intestine and kidneys, but its mode of action is completely different or completely opposite of that the parathyroid hormone. So in this way, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin both act together or interact together to maintain the normal blood calcium level. And so here are these three hormones, and these three hormones are really very important for the maintenance of the normal blood calcium level. Okay, so it has been understood that to understand the entire homeostasis of calcium metabolism, it is really very important to understand the importance of vitamin D in this entire regulation. As you all know that vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, and this fat soluble vitamin can be synthesized in our body in presence of sunlight. That's why it is known as sunshine vitamin. Now this vitamin D can be available in two different forms. One is vitamin D2 and another one is vitamin D3. Vitamin D can be available in two different parts. One is vitamin D2, that is also known as ergosterol, and another one is vitamin D3, that is also known as cholecalciferol. Now this ergosterol is mainly derived from the plant sources, and cholecalciferol is derived from the animal sources. So it is also known as vitamin D2 or ergosterol, and it is also known as vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol. Now, before entering to the entire pathway of the vitamin D synthesis, So it is important to know that vitamin D can be synthesized only in the body if there is a presence, if it is present that 7-dehydrocholesterol is present in our skin. And it is essential fatty acid is very much important for the formation of this 7-dehydrocholesterol in our skin. So in presence of UVB rays, which has 290 to 315 nanometer and which is mainly available between 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So whenever any people can exposed in sunlight, then and if 7-dehydrocholesterol is present in his or her skin, then in presence of UVB sunlight, this 7-dehydrocholesterol is converted into pre-vitamin D3. And this pre-vitamin D3 is converted into vitamin D3, and this vitamin D3 we can get this vitamin D3 from diet. It has several dietary sources, mostly fatty liver or mostly the fish liver oil are the excellent source of vitamin D. So if we consume any kind of dietary sources of vitamin D, then the pre-vitamin D3 to vitamin D3 and the vitamin D3 from the diet together can transport it to liver via vitamin D binding protein, and here in the liver it is mainly in presence of 25-dehydroxylase enzyme. It can convert it into 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. And now this 25-hydroxycholecalciferol is transported to kidney, and here in the presence of 1-hydroxylase enzyme, it is converted into 125-dehydroxycholecalciferol, and this is the active form of vitamin D. So precisely we can say that in presence of sunlight or UVB, the 7-dehydroxycholesterol present in our skin is converted into pre-vitamin D3. Now this pre-vitamin D3 is converted to vitamin D3 along with the vitamin D we are obtaining from our dietary sources. These together are transported to the blood via chylomicron, and then it is transported to liver via vitamin D binding protein, and here in the liver, in the presence of 25-hydroxylase enzyme, it is converted into 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. Means one hydroxylation reaction occurs where one OH molecule or one OH group has been inserted into the molecule or vitamin D3 molecule. Now this 25-hydroxy D3 is converted or it is transported into kidney, and in the kidney, in the presence of 1-hydroxylase enzyme, in the kidney it is converted into 125-dehydroxy vitamin D3, where two molecule of OH molecule or hydroxyl molecule get incorporated into the vitamin D3 structure. And finally we can get the active form, that is the 125-dehydroxy vitamin D3, and it is the form which mainly also known as calcitriol, and this calcitriol form mainly acts like a steroid hormone in our body. As steroid in our body, and like other steroid hormone, it also has various target areas. Like I have already stated that kidney, small intestine and bones are the 3 target areas of this hormone, which is the active form of vitamin D, and this active form of vitamin D is very much essential for the maintenance of the normal blood calcium level. Okay. Now the various functions of active form of vitamin D. Okay, the calcitriol or active form of vitamin D, it has 3 different target areas. In case of intestine, here this active form of vitamin D generally binds to a specific receptor and form calcitriol receptor complex. Now this calcitriol receptor complex approaches to the DNA to produce some proteins. Those are known as carrier proteins or calmodulin, and they are generally necessary for the binding of calcium ions, and so that the entire intestinal absorption process can be enhances. So calcitriol in this way increases the intestinal absorption of dietary calcium. So here it is said that it's like a steroid hormone. Though it is a vitamin, still it acts like a steroid hormone, and it binds to a specific receptor present in the cell surface and produces a particular complex, that is a hormone receptor complex, and this hormone receptor complex approaches to the specific approaches to the DNA, and from DNA it is produces some protein through the translation the process, and these proteins are known as carrier proteins, and they are very, very important for the absorption of the dietary calcium, and they are known as calmodulin. So this is the entire process how vitamin D works on intestine to increase the dietary calcium absorption, and thus in this way it helps to maintain the calcium homeostasis in our body. Okay. Second one is the bones. Calcitriol and vitamin D mainly promote the deposition of bone minerals so that the bone development can proceed. Here, the two most important minerals those are required for the proper bone development are calcium and phosphorus. So now calcitriol generally stimulates the production of hydroxyapatite complex so that the bone formation can be enhanced and bone remodeling can occur. And also sometimes it also happens that when blood calcium level goes down, then calcitriol also triggers the osteoclast cells to degrade the bone and to liberate the free calciums from the bones to circulating blood, just to increase the circulating blood calcium level. So in this way it mainly helps both in mineralization and demineralization of bones. Now the third one, the third target area is kidney. Here the calcitriol or active form of vitamin D, that is 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, generally it increases the renal reabsorption process of calcium by proximal tubule so that larger amount of calcium can be excreted by the kidneys. In this way, it helps to regain the calcium and to moving back that calcium from kidney to circulating blood just to increase the blood calcium level. And it mainly, in case of kidney, it is done in the proximal tubule. Okay. Now, the second hormone. After completing the calcitriol, which is the vitamin active form of vitamin D, we are proceeding to the next hormone, that is known as parathormone or PTH. So, like vitamin D, it also has three distinct target areas. Small intestine, another one is bones, and the last one is kidneys. Okay. When it acts, as I have said earlier, that hormone only released whenever it is required in our body. And it is mainly happen when there is any kind of change in the blood parameter. PTH only released when there is low blood calcium level. I have mentioned earlier that the normal blood calcium range is 9 to 11 mg per dl. If the blood calcium level goes below of this range, then it triggers the release of a specific hormone, that is parathyroid hormone. So decreased blood calcium level triggers the release of the parathyroid hormone, and this parathyroid hormone is mainly released by the parathyroid gland, or more precisely the chief cells of the parathyroid gland. So decreased blood calcium level generally gives a positive signaling to the parathyroid gland or to the chief cells to produce parathyroid hormone to maintain the normal blood calcium level. And here how it works. So after having the low blood calcium level, it triggers the release of PTH hormone. Now this PTH hormone has two distinct target areas: small intestine, bones and kidney. In case of bones, it generally activates the osteoclast cells. Here, in our bone, there are two certain types of cells are present. One is osteoclast and another one is osteoblast. The osteoclast cells are generally associated with the demineralization of the bone, and the osteoblast cells are generally associated with the formation of the bone. And as we can see that the decreased blood calcium level happens, so here the PTH generally activates the osteoclast cells. So osteoclast cells generally degrade the bone matrix. So activation of the osteoclast cells generally stimulates bone demineralization Now, the stimulation of bone demineralization means the liberation of free calcium in the bloodstream, and it will eventually increase the blood calcium level. So here, in case of bone, the PTH generally activates the osteoclast cells, and after activation, these osteoclast cells stimulates the demineralization process. And now the demineralization of bone generally liberate or free some calcium ions into the bloodstream, and eventually it increases the blood calcium level. So the changes the decreased blood calcium level, for which reason the PTH has been secreted, and after the secretion of PTH, in case of bones, it eventually things have happened, and which generally increases the blood calcium level. This is the one target area. Now the second one, that is the small intestine. Here we can see that in case of small intestine, PTH generally increases the calcium uptake by the small intestine. Which type of calcium? Dietary calcium. The calcium, those are obtained from diets. Those type of calciums are generally necessary. It is necessary to properly absorb those dietary calciums, and those dietary calcium absorptions is generally mediated by the intestinal cells. And here, in case of calcium absorption, the calmodulin protein that is secreted, or that is mainly secreted by the vitamin D, and that calmodulin protein helps to increase the calcium uptake by the intestinal cells, so that it will also eventually increase the blood calcium level. So here it is in case of small intestine, the release of PTH that directly activates the calcium uptake calcium uptake from the small intestine to directly increase the blood calcium level. And here one point is important to remember, that the calcium uptake by the intestine is very much mediated or very much controlled by the another important hormone, that is the active form of vitamin D, that is calcitriol. And here the another role of PTH also occur in case of kidney, as I have stated earlier that the kidney is the place where the active form of vitamin D has been is formed. So another important role of PTH in the kidney to increase the vitamin D formation, and that vitamin D formation eventually increases the production of calomodulin, which is the calcium binding protein, and increased level of calomodulin ultimately increases the calcium uptake by the intestinal cells, and eventually all these things works together to increase the blood calcium level. Apart from enhances the formation of active form of vitamin D, the another important role of PTH in case of kidney is it stimulates the reabsorption of calciums. Those can be secreted through the urine, but because of the reabsorption process that is conducted by the PTH in the kidney, the calcium can be reabsorbed and can get back to the circulating blood to increase the overall blood calcium level. So this is the entire scenario where we can see that the decreased blood calcium level is a change in the blood parameter, and which eventually triggers or give a positive signaling towards our parathyroid gland to release PTH hormone from the chief cells. And this PTH hormone has three distinct target area. One is bone, another one is into small intestine, and another one, and the last one is the kidney. In case of bones, it activates the osteoclast cells so that the bone can be demineralized, and after demineralization it stimulates the release of free calcium ions from the bones to circulating blood, and eventually it will increase the blood calcium level. This is the first way. Another way is the action on the small intestine. In case of small intestine, we can see that PTH generally improves or generally increase the calcium uptake by the intestinal cells, and this function is very much mediated by the vitamin C or the vitamin D or calcitriol, and which is mainly formed in our kidney. And in kidney, the formation of the active form of vitamin D actually enhances the dietary uptake of calcium, and on the other hand, in the kidney, PTH also stimulates the calcium renal reabsorption and calcium by decreasing or minimizing the calcium excretion. And this three pathway generally goes on a line to increase the blood calcium level, to maintain the normal blood calcium level, that is the 9 to 11 mg per dl. So it happens in everybody's body when there is a decrease in blood calcium level occurs, and this entire pathway happens to increase or just to maintain the calcium homeostasis in our body. Okay, now I am proceeding to the next hormone, that is known as calcitonin. So calcitonin is also a peptide hormone, and this calcitonin is also very much important to maintain the calcium homeostasis of the human being. And this calcitonin is mainly released from the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland, and this hormone acts simply opposite of parathyroid hormone, and by acting in this way, the parathyroid hormone and the calcitriol or calcitonin interact between each other just to maintain the calcium homeostasis in our body. As I stated earlier that PTH mainly works to increase the blood calcium level, here we can see that calcitonin, main function of the calcitonin is to decrease the blood calcium level whenever there is any situation arises that increases the blood calcium level in a human's body that is beyond the normal range. So here it is. So if there is any increase in the blood calcium level in individual's life, then what happened? It gives a positive signaling towards our thyroid gland. And here the parafollicular cells are present in the thyroid gland, and this thyroid and from this parafollicular cells one hormone is released or secreted, that is known as calcitonin. The calcitonin also has the three distinct target areas, and here we can see that in case of bones, it may mainly activate, the most important function in bone, the calcitonin, is to activate the osteoblast cells. So osteoblast cells, the main function of the osteoblast cells is to promote the bone formation by enhancing or promoting the deposition of calcium and phosphate in the bone matrix. So here, the activation of osteoblast cells initially or in turn, it stimulates the calcium deposition in the bone. So whenever there is an increased blood calcium level in someone's blood, then it eventually, when this increased amount of calcium can move in towards bones, then eventually it will decrease the blood calcium level. So this is the first way the calcitonin works, that is activates the osteoblast cells and helps in the deposition of calcium and phosphates in the bone, so that the bone remodeling or the bone development or bone formation can happen, and it will definitely decrease the excess calcium level that is present in the circulating blood as they are moving towards the bones. Okay, now the second one. Eventually, release of calcitonin also inhibit the release of PTH secretion. And as we all know that PTH is important for the formation of the active form of vitamin D. So the lack of PTH also triggers the reduction in the formation of the active form of vitamin D. Now this lack of PTH and the lack of active form of vitamin D eventually decreases the production of the calmodulin, that is the very much important protein, carrier protein for the transportation of the absorption of the dietary calcium in our diet, our body. So the lack of PTH and the lack of active form of vitamin D eventually decreases the rate of intestinal absorption of calcium in our diet. So this eventually results in the decreased blood calcium level. And this is the second way. Now the third one. And in case of kidney, we can see that calcitonin mainly works to excrete more and more calcium from the body, so that the increased level of calcium can be minimized by excreting some amount of calcium from the body. And so this is the pathway through which the calcitonin works. So increased blood calcium level triggers the release of calcitonin, and this increased calcitonin can then trigger three different target areas. In case of bones, it generally activates the osteoblast cells so that it can promote the bone formation, so that more and more kind of calcium ions, free calcium ions, can move towards the bones, so that the free calcium level in the circulating blood can be reduced. And secondly, release of calcitonin can also eventually decrease the release of PTH hormone, and that eventually decrease the formation and the production of the active form of vitamin D. And the lack of production of vitamin D will also reduce the production of calmodulin protein, and eventually it will reduce the dietary absorption of calcium, or the intestinal absorption of dietary calcium, and that will eventually decrease the blood calcium level. And the third one, in case of kidney, then here you can see that calcitonin increases the blood calcium excretion of calcium, or the renal excretion, or the excretion of calcium by the kidney. Increase the renal excretion of calcium, and also it in this way it mainly decreases the blood calcium level. So here we can see the interplay of these three different or distinct hormones work together just to maintain the 1 mineral homeostasis in our body, and these three hormones act accordingly to maintain the normal homeostasis in their different target areas in a different way, just to ensure the entire calcium homeostasis, so that the normal range of calcium can be maintained in individual body. And so here are these mechanisms. Thank you.